All right, we are back into Shmois, second Chumash. And as we mentioned last week, I think, anyway, the Chumash Bereshis is primarily focused on the always on the fathers of the nation, fathers of the world, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yankiv, and the Shvoti. And Chumash Shmois, this is the beginning of the development, so to speak, of the nation as such. We did not have anymore this bright support of the always and this direct link to the top connection. So now the Jewish nation is left, so to speak, on its own. And where are they left on its own? In Mitzrayim. And it didn't take long before the Mitzrayim actually usurped, took over power over them, and subjugated them into slavery and into very vicious slavery. Slavery where they lost totally the sense of human respect. I mean, this is slavery at its worst. The Gemara tells us that the Eden had to supply a certain amount of building material. They had to make the brick. And if they were short of the amount of brick to fill the particular task that they had to accomplish, then they would use human filler. Why? Sorry? Infants, children. I mean, this is tragic enough, but the whole idea of the human being being trampled on like a piece of brick. So they lost completely their sense of self-respect, and eventually they lost their sense of nationhood. The Gemara tells us that actually Eden was so lost in Egypt, in the Egyptian culture, quote unquote, whatever culture that is, they became Avodah Zarah. Eden was Avodah Zarah in Mitzrayim, alongside with the Egyptians. And as the Rambam describes it very briefly, he said that they were mamash at the danger point, where the entire effort of Rome, the entire plan that Rome set in motion, that God's name and God's presence should be known in the world, were going to be lost in antiquity. They would be lost in the archives of destruction. This entire phenomenon, everybody should know, just like before. If you don't understand the word I'm saying, please ask me, because the worst thing that a person can do is talk to the walls. was all planned. It's intended. The Jewish nation was born from a state of complete obliteration, of oblivion, complete destruction. And what is the great significance of this? We once mentioned this point in a different context. The great significance of this is that it be clear both to us, to the Jewish nation itself, and to the world. And it should be, so to speak, created in the world such an entity that is exclusively a godly creation. This is a very important point to understand about the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation was not born, was not created as a nation the same way as all other nations in the world. As a matter of fact, up until the experience in Mitzrayim, that's exactly what was happening. Yaakov and his children formed a nation, a small nation, but they were a nation. They lived in Goshen, they lived separately, they had their own way of life.
I'm confused by that because in the Torah it says that they filled the land of Egypt, like throughout the land of Egypt, they were government, they were in everything, but it seems to say that they were living all over Egypt.
That was much later. Originally, Yaakov settled in Goshen, and this is where they were. And they were clearly identified. This was all, this occurred after the passing of Yosef and his brothers, the Shmotim, the entire connection to the original fathers, the original building blocks of the nation was now sort of in the past, forgotten. There's an interesting similarity. When you go back to the beginning of creation, was Adam Rishon was the first man. And Adam Rishon, he was what's called the Tzir Kabav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was a godly creation. God made it in his own hands, so to speak. So Adam Rishon, between him and the connection with God was a most direct possible. He didn't have a father, he didn't have a mother. God formed his body from clay, from earth and water, formed it, and then he put a neshama into it, as it says. And all his instruction came directly from Hashem. So he was, so to speak, a direct testimony, a direct presence of a godly presence in the world. It didn't take more than 2 generations. Adam, Shais, Enosh. The 3rd generation of Adam is Enosh, and at that time already there was Avodah Zarah in the world. Right. I mean, it was. Excuse me? Then there was. It started like the Rambam described. It started by a small error, and then slowly it developed into Avodah Zarah. It is the principal tendency in human tendency to find, so to speak, a presence, a self-fulfilling and self-satisfying presence, a presence where you're dependent on God, is something which a human being has to understand and has to kind of This is called avodah. Understand the significance of it. And the tendency is that he should try to be self-sufficient. This happened in the Enosh, and this happened later on in the Hafloga. The Hafloga was also very soon after the Mabul. There was a flood. There was clearly God's hand wiped, cleaned out the world, and started all over again. And the world was recreated by godly miracles. Noach lived in this ark for a year with all the animals. It's camouflaged as a natural phenomenon. As an ark, was a box, and it floated on the water. But you understand that this was all miraculous, the whole survival. And soon after, there was already the Der Hafloga. What was the Der Hafloga? Der Hafloga, they wanted to establish an independent, self-sufficient entity within the world. This is all very, so to speak, part of the godly plan. I want you to understand this. The whole creation of the world, as we've learned in Chassidus, is for the purpose that there will be a dira lo yisbara b'tachtonim. There should be a godly dwelling in tachtonim, in the lower world. That there be a dira dwelling for God in the world, it is not sufficient that God should make the dira. The dira has to be made by the world itself. In other words, the world itself has to come to its own realization that the world wants to prepare dinner, wants to wants to welcome God in its midst. The fact that God can create His own dinner is that's not sufficient at all, because then the world remains what it is. And the tendency remains the same thing, the same tendency to separate, to break away, and to become self-sufficient, independent of God. Ultimately, what God wants is that human beings should recognize that relating to God and dependency of God does not diminish, does not take anything away from the human being. On the contrary, it enhances the human being. It enriches the human being. It elevates the human being to a level that he could never reach on his own. In every respect, in terms of intelligence, in terms of comprehension, in terms emotionally, in every respect. And when a human being tends to kind of close himself into his own self, then he begins to tend towards the animal kingdom. It's almost difficult to differentiate between the human being and the animal. So this principle itself applies also to the Jewish people. This is exactly what happened. The Jewish people had lost the support and the enlightenment that they were getting from the originals of Rome, Yitzhak, Yankiv, and the Shmotim, the 12 tribes, who were all of the highest caliber of people. And now they had to find they were on their own. And as they were on their own, I can't say quickly, but they, in short order, lost their self-pride and their perspective on life. And they sunk into the Egyptian culture. What's Egyptian culture? Egyptian culture essentially, well, the Egyptians, they worship nature. This is why the Nile was their god. What was the Nile? Nile was that which supplied them their natural resource, that watered their fields and helped grow their produce. The sheep was their symbol of their deity, because it also represents a natural power. Everything in the world, whatever it is, everything contained within worldliness. This is why, as you learned, when you learn in Mitzvah, at the end of this passage, and Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro, and he said to him that the God of the Jews, the Hebrews, sent me to you. Paro said, I don't know, I never heard of such a God. What does it mean, I never heard of such a God? It wasn't a stupid, Paro was not an ignorant poyer, an ignorant villager, farmer. He was a very learned, by their standards, a very learned man. And he said, Leactures Hashem, he meant a very precise answer. He says, you talk about God that is superior to nature. That doesn't exist in my book. The natural world, the nature of the world, this is the reality. And this is what we have worshipped. And the Yidden living there had slipped down to that perspective, into Avodah Zarah. And yet, despite the fact that practically speaking, in their daily lives, they had actually slipped down and they became, so to speak, slaves in the true sense of the word, still, ultimately, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to them, and he said to them that I was sent to you by God to take you out of Mitzrayim, some odd way, they believed him. They believed him. Where did they get this insight, this ability to believe in such a fantastic statement? No. This was not wishful thinking. This was something that touched them.
It wasn't prophecy.
Not without that name. So he used certain words, a certain terminology, but look, just project the situation. They were slaves for 210 years. They were in Egypt for 210 years. They were enslaved under the worst of circumstances. And I can't think exactly, 180 years of the most devastating subjugation. And they lost their way completely. If they were sitting there waiting for the redemption, they wouldn't have slipped down, and they were completely destroyed as a nation. Where did they get that ability to actually believe in this and accept Moshe? That was a testimony to the unique nature of their soul.
These people that fell from grace, they were the children of the 12 tribes, the brothers, or they were grandchildren.
What are you talking about?
The Yidden who fell from grace and went to the Egyptian way. Yeah. They were the children of Levi and the children of Yehuda, or they were the grandchildren.
They were ultimately the grandchildren. Some of them were children, some of them the grandchildren.
So not even there was the second generation.
The second generation still survived. Basically, there were some exceptions, but yeah, it was the grandchildren.
And out of the 70 people that went, or the 68 that went into Mitzrayim, were any of them alive when slavery started? No. There were a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, it says in Posuk, the entire generation. That entire generation. No, because I forgot. Moshe's mother,
Yocheved.
she was like 130 when she was divorced by her husband. Therefore, she would have had Moshe around 130 years old, and she was the one who was born on the way to Mitzrayim. So they were only there for 210 years, like that. They were so quickly, 30 years, they would have to be enslaved, like that. It's like one generation.
Yeah, well, Yocheved was an exception, as I said. But generally, that generation had already passed.
What did you say when you said they did? What was the answer that you said they accepted Moshe? How did they accept Moshe?
Oh, so how did they accept Moshe? And that was the whole point of this whole thing, of this whole episode, this whole experience. It is to force the surfacing the revelation of the inner soul of the Jew. In other words, it was not based on any learning and any intellectual perception and emotional perception. It was something which is just true of the Jew. And when Moshe came to them and said, it is the natural response of the Jew to accept and believe in God. And this is how their response was. There's an interesting phenomenon and occurrence that you already learned about this year. That Moshe, Moshe grew up in Paris palace. And when he came out of the palace to see what's going on with his brethren, so the Torah tells us two experiences that Moshe had in 2 consecutive days. The first day he came out and he saw an Egyptian beating up on a Jew, and he killed the Egyptian to save the Jew. And the second day he came out, he saw 2 Jews arguing and fighting, or close to fighting. And Moshe killed the Mitzri.
Yeah, that's how he did it, or that's just the Midrash?
Well, the Midrash and how he did are not 2 different worlds. The Midrash is telling us how.
But sometimes that's it. The Midrash says something like, or gives more detail, or add a little bit different to what the Torah.
That's for sure. The Midrash cannot say anything different than the Torah.
That's what it is. It kills them like that.
The Midrash says that, basing itself on the word in the Torah. Which word is Midrash basing itself on? Because it says, when he came out the second day, and he reprimanded the Jews fighting, so then they said to him, who are you to give us a reprimand? Right? That's what they said. And they said, are you intending to kill me like you killed the Mitzri? This is that statement that threw Moshe off, that Moshe, as I'm going to explain now. But on these words, Oimer means you were saved, which means, so Rashi says, that from the Medrash, that this tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu killed him by an utterance, by speech, rather than by his hands. Okay, so Moshe came out the second day, and
Sorry, but how can you see that some of the Joshua say different explanations of the occurrence, like one comma or whatever says one thing, and someone else says something else? Of what happened?
about my,
Not relevant.
it's relevant. It's something that you should have a perspective on. Perhaps I'll see if I have time. If not, we'll do another time. But you deserve an explanation on this. Okay.
In the Midrash, it says that Egyptian was the man who had raped the husband, and
There was
two Jewish men were actually fighting. One with the husband, one with the brother, and the husband was like, she was raped, I don't want her anymore, I want a divorce, and he's like, that's my sister, you have no right to do that, and that's why they were arguing over that thing, and Moshe let them go, and according to the Midrash, these two Jews later on caused him trouble. I forgot what.
Okay, let me stick to the thing. We'll touch upon these things also. So Moshe reprimanded them, and they alluded to the fact that he killed the Mitzri. And this, Rashi says over there an interesting thing. Rashi says that Moshe, when he heard this, he was taken aback, and he got scared. And he says, the thing now it became known. So it became known. There are different implications in that statement. Simple implication is that his deed with the Mitzvah became known, and therefore he is in danger of being punished for it by Paro. Another implication over here is that Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu the whole time was wondering, why are Eden so subjugated? And he was also looking for a way out to redeem them, take him out of this kind of subjugation. And when Moshe saw this episode, so he said, if Eden are capable of this type of activity, which I'll explain what, then who knows if they can possibly be redeemed altogether. That's what I should be done. This is a medrash. So Moshe Rabbeinu became in doubt. He was very shocked. Is it possible to redeem the Jewish people? What was the thing that he experienced here that threw him into this shock? What his experience was the phenomenon of Loshen Hora. Loshen Hora, it very simply means speaking evil about someone, one person speaking ill about the other person. Loshen Hora. So Loshen Hora, the Gemara says, is really a very, very profound sin. The Gemara says that Loshen Hora, the Loshen is kotel tlosa. He kills three people. He kills the person that is being spoken of, the person who speaks, and the person who receives, who accepts the message. It's a very terrible thing, and the Gemara said that Lashon Hara is counterbalanced to the three capital sins of Avodah Zarah, Yaros, and Shvuchas Dam. Nevertheless, it's actually only speech. In comparison to Avodah Zarah itself, it's comparable, but still Avodah Zarah is Avodah Zarah. This is Lashon Hara is not punishable. The Torah is not punishable by capital punishment. Avodah Zarah is. So Moshe Rabbeinu saw that there is such a thing as Lashon Hara amongst the Yidden. This threw him in a scare that perhaps even cannot be redeemed. And this is the question that the Rebbe asked him in a Sikha. The fact that Eden are oiv Avodah Zarah, that did not preclude the possibility of them being redeemed. Everybody knows the word preclude? So why don't you start now?
Why did you stop?
Preclude means make it impossible. That does not interfere with it could still be redeemed, even though the evidence is on. And the fact is, this Avodah Zarah phenomenon is really, it's a shocking thing, and it took many, many years to shake it out from the Jewish people.
What, the Lashon Hara?
No, Avodah Zarah. ultimately we did get rid of it, but it took many years. You know the story of Purim? The story of Purim attested the fact that we were rid of Avodah Zarah. Because that was the whole thing, that Mordechai would stand up facing Haman and not bow down. And even in Bovel, after the first destruction, the first was Amigdash, they were Mesa Nefesh and in the infant Avodah Zarah. But before that there was Avodah Zarah, and during the first Amigdash there was Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara tells us that Avodah Zarah even carried with them along from Mitzrayim throughout the whole journey in the Yam Suf, in the Red Sea when the Yam Suf was split, into the Midbar, at Matan Torah time, all the way throughout the journey in the desert, into Eretz Yisrael, and eventually they erected the Avodah Zarah in Eretz Yisrael. That is something that they brought along with. Somehow this was something that stuck with them. I want to tell you, just to give us a little bit, so to speak, a little bit of peace of mind, somewhat. The Gemara tells a story that there was an Amoira, I believe it was Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great Amoraim. And he was sitting in this medicine, and he was giving a drasha. And in the drasha, in the Gemara, there are all kinds of drashas. A drasha will talk halacha, and there's Agoda. Agoda means it's talking about hidden things that occurred, and stories that have to do with the drashim of Tanakh, and also. So Rabbi Yochanan says, let us talk about Menashe. Who was Menashe? Menashe ben Chizkiah was a king in Israel, a Jewish king, the son of Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Chizkiyahu HaMelech was a big son. And Menashe was an Ovid Avodah Zarah. He was a Melech, a king, Jewish king, who established Avodah Zarah for many, many years, and he was very adamant about it. Afterward, at the end of his life, he did tshuva, but it was a very very difficult period for many, many years. So Rabbi Yochanan said, let's talk about Menashe. The Droshim, Dashim, the Pshut Menashe. At night, Menashe came to Rabbi Yochanan in a dream, and he said, who are you to talk about me? How dare you talk about me? You think you know how to learn? You think you know the Torah? I'll ask you a question. And he asked him a question, Yochanan didn't know the answer. Yochanan says, no, what's the answer? He tells him the answer. So the next day, Rabbi Yochanan sat down. Again, he said, let's talk about Menashe. But this time he spoke a little bit more, with more respect. Let us talk about our Chaver Menashe. Our Chaver, I learned something from him, our Chaver. At night, Menashe comes to him and says, Chaver, you're a Chaver of yours? What kind of Chaver? He asked him another question. He didn't know. I'll tell you the answer. So then Rabbi Yochanan asked him, if you were so smart and you knew the Torah so well, how come you did what you did? This is what I want to tell you. So Menashe said to him, I want you to know that if you were there my time with me, you would have been running after me trying to catch the end of my garment so that you should be able to join me. You'd be chasing after me lest you miss the opportunity to be with me. In other words, we don't, these are all, Avodah Zarah is Avodah Zarah, but this was a kind of a period where the whole union of Avodah Zarah had to be uprooted, and the Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah was enormously powerful, enormously profound, and said to Rabbi Yochanan that you would have been the first one to chase after me to join me in Avodah Zarah.
Today, in today's society, most Jews are secular, right? They make 20%, are religious in the world, but they're secular because religion is so uncool these days to the Goyim. Like, all the Goyim want to be secular. But if all the Goyim want to be religious, what we see instead of being secular, they just go idol worship again.
That's for sure. Idol worship.
We're once again repeating the idol worship.
No, idol worship is there's still residue in some place in the eastern, in Asia, but generally idol worship is out. Everybody recognizes it's an abomination.
I'm not saying you're trying to be placed with secularism, and it's just a term. Instead of idol worship, we're just trying not to believe.
Well, anyway, so this is what occurred, with Avodah Zarah and all that. Now that I mentioned all this, I will tell you another little story, and then we'll come back to our story. This story I'll have to be brief because it's a little bit involved. The story is that there was a big Chassidish Rav in the city, and he had many misnagdim who wanted to oppose him. He was Chassidish Rav. They didn't like Chassidish Rav in the city, and there was the Shamish who served for the Bezdin for the city. The governing body of the city, of the Jewish governing body, decided that they are going to fire this Rav. So they gave the Shamash, the tzedlum told me you should go to the Rav and tell him that he's fired. So this Shamash was very simple Jew. And he said, fire this Rav, please, why do you want to fire this Rav? I know for sure that he's a big tzaddik. How do you know he's such a big tzaddik? So he tells him, I'll tell you the story. I told him, because every day I used to come to him. I go around in the morning, early in the morning, that's my job, I was the alarm clock. Wake the city, to wake everybody up. So whenever I used to come to his house to knock on the door would open, and he would come out with another very, very, very impressive looking person. I asked him, who is this person? He said, that's Eliyahu. And every day Eliyahu would greet him. Then one day I came to him, and instead of this one person, there was this person, there was another person with him at the door. And they said goodbye, and then I asked him, who is this other person? So he tells to me that this other person is Menashe ben Chizkiah. What? Eliyahu Hanavi. What? No, the sexton, they were visiting the Rav. They came to visit the Rav. The Rav came and would learn to whatever it is. And this time there was, in tradition to Eliyahu, there was also Chizkiah, Menashe and Chizkiah. So he said, I'm sorry? The king that I mentioned before. So I asked him, what was the Menashe doing here? Why did he come? So the Rav tells me that the story was that there was a Yid who was killed by Goyim, and his wife was left an almana, and they didn't have any money, and she came to the Bezdin. In that town there was a takon, a tikkun. It was a part of the constitution of the community, that if a man dies and the woman doesn't have money to collect the ksuba, that the community gives her the ksuba money, so she can survive. So she came to them asking for the ksuba. And they were debating whether she deserves to get the ksuba. What was the problem? Because this man that was killed by Goyim, what happened was, one day he got up and he went into a place of Avodah Zarah and he broke all the Avodah Zarah. He smashed them like Abraham, he smashed them all the Avodah Zarah. So they caught up with him and they hanged him. So the peasant in the community said, look, we guaranteed, we are obligated to pay for a super person who gets killed somewhere, dies. But he killed himself. He brought this on to himself. He put himself in danger. And he brought this on to himself. So that, the community is obligated to support this kind of a thing. True, he may go to see the snatchers, he did a big thing, but still, this is on his own. This is not obligatory. So they sent now to me the Shaila to the Rav. He should ask him whether the community is obligated to pay the ksuba or not. The Rav was of Shmelke Menikosburg. I don't know if you heard of this. So this came to me for this question. So Menashe ben Chizkiel came to me to plead in favor of the Almona that the community should pay her the ksuba. Because Menashe ben Chizkiel came to say, he told me that his neshama was in this man. And he came to atone for his sins of Avodah Zarah. That's why he went to break all the Avodah Zarah. And therefore, he pleaded to me that I should pass and he should get the extra ksuba. I don't know, That's not, anyway, let me get back. Story, it was a story. Let me get back to our point here. So, Yidden were if the Avodah Zarah in Mitzrayim. And yet, that did not faze Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? I can redeem him, I can get him out of Mitzrayim. But when he saw Loshen Hora, then he said, I don't know whether it's possible to get him out of it. What's so severe about Loshen Hora? And the explanation is this. This is the Rebbe's explanation. Nobody can present the kind of explanation except the Rebbe. That the whole redemption from Mitzrayim, even if they were completely integrated and assimilated with the Mitzrayim. To identify the Jewish people as a nation and to take them out of Mitzrayim meant to actually, so to speak, I said, to tear away from one part from another part, because even were completely integrated. It's called Goyim Mikerev Goy, a nation from within a nation. They were integrated in the Mitzrayim, they couldn't tell one from the other. And who was able to identify it? Only God. I can identify, and it was God's it was God's decision, so to speak, that this nation is mine and this nation is not mine. This principle that God had pulled this nation out from within the guts of another nation was not based on any of their particular qualities, because they were also Avodah Zarah. It was not based on their intelligence, on their emotional superiority, or anything like that. It was just a national identity. That this is what's called Bechira. The choice in the Jewish people was not based on any qualities, it was based on the essence of the Jewish people. But that choice and the essence of the Jewish people, that requires that there be some kind of a national unity. It is a nation that God drew out from Israel, not individuals. And if there is Lashon Hora amongst them. Lashon Hora, the whole principle of Lashon Hora is, and this is why it's so severe, Lashon Hora breaks the unity within the Jewish people. It breaks. Avodah Zarah doesn't. Gemara says,
Not even Jews, was their return.
what? No, but the unity among the Jewish people. The Gemara tells us the story that there was in a time, that this is an interesting contrast. There was David HaMelech. Everybody heard of David HaMelech? So I'm a big tzaddik. The first king, the first king of, so this is the eternal king of the Jewish people. And in the time of David HaMelech, he even had all kinds of different wars. There were enemies all around. And they were all tzaddikim that went out to the war. Those who went in the army of David, they were all tzaddikim. And yet, they had lost many wars. And they suffered a lot of casualties. And then later on, there was, you know, that the Jewish people split up into two kingdoms. One kingdom was Yehuda, and one kingdom was Israel. And the kingdom of Israel, there was a melech, originally in Rovam ben Avot, and then eventually there was a king for many years, Achav. Achav was an Eved Avodah Zarah. In general, that kingdom was involved with Avodah Zarah almost throughout its existence. And Achav was an Eved Avodah Zarah. And yet, in the time of Achav, when his armies went to war, they would be victorious. And the Gemara says, how come? David HaMelech's armies suffered, and Achav is victorious. And the Gemara says, one secret weapon. In Achav's time, they were all very closely meeting, all friends. There was shalom amongst them. And this is why they went out and they were victorious. They were matzliach. And David HaMelech, there was David HaMelech in his armies, there was discord. Misunderstanding. There was controversy. Mispronouncing between you two, okay? And that's why they was okay. So this discord, this disagreement, this controversy, this puts a wedge, so to speak, breaks the unity of the Jewish people. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu saw. Avodah Zarah, we can cure Avodah Zarah, but if the Jewish people are not united, are not one people, then how can God choose these people if they're not a people? They don't exist as a people, as a nation. And this is what scared Moshe off. Are they really of this type of a nation? That they're full of Lashon Hora. As it turns out, there was Lashon Hora, but actually the Lashon Hora that we know of, like you mentioned before, these were two people, Dosim Aviram, that continue to, so to speak, follow Moshe Rabbeinu and create all kinds of problems for Moshe all the way into the desert, until finally they were swallowed up in the Machlokes with Korach. But Moshe Rabbeinu said this was the thing that threw Moshe off, and how is it going to be? How they're going to be a redemption? Because he saw Lashon Hora. What does this tell us? Every individual person has all kinds of qualities, starting from his intellect and his emotions and good deeds and so forth. What defines a Jew? So we said before, a Jew has a munah, he has a soul. But even deeper than that, there is this nakuda, this point, that he belongs to this nation. This is, so to speak, the overall existence. His individuality comes after. He's first and foremost a Jew, and then himself. That's an interesting phenomenon. We mentioned many times this which the Rambam explains, that sometimes a Yid has, one is obligated to do, he has to do a mitzvah, and it's kind of a mitzvah that you cannot do under duress. If you're forced, he has to do it willingly. Like certain korbanos that a person is obligated to bring certain things. So there's a principle in halacha. And if somebody is obligated to do something and he refuses to do it, but it's something that you cannot do it under duress, you can't force him. He has to do it willingly, he has to agree to do it. He'll fix it afterwards. So what do we do? So there's certain times that what we do is the person pulls him into a room and gets beaten up until he says, okay, I'm willing to do it. And then you go and do it. What? That's right, so that's a good question, right? Let's say if somebody has to give a divorce to his wife. A divorce is valid only if it's done willingly. If the man gives it. Nobody can, huh? That's right, you give him malka until he says, write on me, I want. And then you can sit down, write the get, and it's a kosher get. So the question is, how is it a kosher get? Look, he was beaten up and he said, write on me, yeah, okay, stop beating me up. That's called volitional, that's called consent. So our great teacher, the Rambam, explains that every Yid, in his essence, wants to do the right thing. And if he says, I don't want, it is not his true self saying. This is the Yetzer Hara. He's a prisoner in his own Yetzer Hara. He's not speaking for himself. He's forced by Yetzer Hara. He's a prisoner. In his Yetzer Hara, Yintri Onsei. And this is why he says no. So when you beat him up, you subdue the Yetzer Hara, then when he says Roitzani, it's his true self that says it. And that's why it's relevant. In describing this essential desire of a Yid to do the right thing, this is why I'm bringing that. In describing this, the Rambam describes all this, it says that every Yid, essentially, in his deep down essence, wants to be a member of the Jewish people. Never wants to break his connection to the Jewish people. He wants to do that which the Jew is supposed to do. And this is a phenomenon that we see throughout Jewish history, and even in our own days, it is something which is phenomenally clear. You have a Reformed family, a Reformed person who knows nothing of Yiddishkeit, doesn't believe in anything, doesn't do anything. He married a Goy Kerachmon Islam. Right? And he's completely, there are no restrictions. Then you come and tell him, no, you married a Goy, your children are not Jewish. He's ready to kill you. What do you mean my children are not Jewish? How can my children be Jewish? How can you say such a thing? Are you throwing me out of the Jewish people? What do you care about the Jewish people? You completely divorce yourself from the Jewish people. I divorced from the Jewish people? Never in a million years. What's so powerful in this evening that when Yid wants to be part of the Jewish people? It's not a national thing. It's not like being an American thing, a French thing. There's something very special about it. And the special point of it is something that is impossible for a Yid to reject, is that the Jewish people are a godly, chosen people. They're unique people. There's no other people in the world that were created by godly interference, by godly decoration, except for the Jewish people. Every other nation was born into existence by a natural development. They had kids. One person had kids, and these kids had kids, and they lived in one geographic area and became a nation. How did Egypt develop into Egyptian land? Just like that. Before Mitzrayim, the Jewish people also developed that same way, in a natural way. There's Avram, Yitzchak, and Yankov. Yankov had 12 sons. 12 sons had children, and there was a nation developed, so to speak. Sure, there was a nation that knew of God and so forth, but basically the nationhood was created, was developed naturally, in a worldly manner. Mitzrayim, experience in Mitzrayim, wiped all of that away. And then it was recreated as a nation, but in entirely a novel manner, novel, new way, that didn't exist before, and this is the essence of the Jewish people. A Jew, no matter where he is, this is why he's so upset when you say, oh, you should not say it, because even though he completely, so to speak, rejects, so to speak, the Jewish philosophy and Jewish way of life and all that, but a Jew, that's repudiating God himself. That he'll never do. Because it is clearly known deep down in every Jewish mind that a Jew, this is the godly definition. And this he will never acquiesce, never agree to reject. Coming back to ourselves, also to every individual, especially people like ourselves who are Bali children, so to speak, who were not reared in the Jewish environment and do not have a direct link, a connection, so to speak, generation after generation, and say, okay, I'm doing this because my father did it, my grandfather did it, my great-grandfather did it, and that's why I feel comfortable with that, so I belong to it, because this is how my home is, this is my family history. About Tshuva has a break in that link, yes, he believes in it and so forth, but believing in it and learning it is not enough strength, enough basis to be able to sustain all the pressures, the challenges that come in life. The challenges that come in life require that there be something very basic, something that is what's called unseverable, something that cannot be uprooted, that cannot be taken away, something that defines me who I am. No matter where I am, this is it. This is not something which I have learned, I created on my own. This is something which is true about me regardless of where I am. This is that point. It's important for every person, especially, as I said, for the Baal Tshuva to reflect and to know and to remember that his belonging to the Jewish people is fundamental. This is something which not only cannot be taken away. I mean, this is something that he cannot uproot from himself. Even if he screams, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do it, there's no way he's lying. He's not telling the truth. This is the basis of our Avodah. Every Yid, as the Rambam describes, wants to be a Yid. Sometimes he's confused, sometimes he doesn't understand, he doesn't have the strength to stand up to his own Yetzer Hara, to stand up to external pressure. But to abdicate, to give up his connection to the Jewish people, that is totally out of the question. And this is how we all come back together again. This is the basis of our strength, and therefore nobody is a stranger. Nobody, no Jew is a stranger in the Jewish people, regardless of where he was. It always comes, this is where he belongs essentially. Even though he doesn't know it and doesn't understand what it is, makes a difference. This is a source of tremendous source of strength. And I said it's beyond strength. It is the root. This is the essence. Both, it's a source of strength, it's a source of comfort. Nobody should consider himself a stranger, that he is coming from outside. Nobody is coming from outside. No one comes from the outside. There's a story which I mentioned here at Philip a while ago, and I will conclude with this. The story is, this is the time of the previous Rebbe, where several Hasidim went to Chicago. Big Hasidim went to Chicago. The task of the mission of the trip to Chicago was double. One is they collect money for the yeshiva, and also to visit the Jews in Chicago and to inspire the Jews in Chicago. Every time that Yoav comes, he gives us new inspiration. So they came to Chicago, and the local Rav, the local Rabbonim, took them around. And they came to visit a certain Gevir. They came to visit him. And this Gevir, this Yid, asked the Rabbonim from New York, they asked him, tell me, why did you come here? Why did you come here to Chicago? Are we missing the Rabbonim? Why did you come here? So the local Rav who was taking their host answered him that every Yid has a noise, a letter in the Sefer Torah. Every Yid has a letter in the Sefer Torah. A letter in the Sefer Torah has to be exactly right, has to be kosher. Sometimes the letter becomes rubbed off and becomes possible. And when the letter becomes possible, what do? You have to get a scribe to correct the letter. These Yidden came to rectify and to make kosher some letters of the Sefer Torah that became possible. Now it's Yidden who became, so to speak, possible. He came to rectify and to bring them back into the fold and to correct these letters. So this was like a kind of a very insightful, very meaningful answer. So they were very quite proud of this episode. They came back to New York, came into the Frierdiker Rebbe, and they reported to him on this trip, on all the things that happened in the trip. And among the things that they reported to him was this visit and the question and the discussion, the question and response that they gave. But they mentioned to him, to Rebbe, the senior, that this even came to correct the Apostleless Oisius, alluding to Apostle Yidden. The Rebbe became very serious. They thought that they would give the Rebbe nachas for such an answer. The Rebbe became very serious. And he said, a Yid is never possible. On a letter of Sefer Torah, sometimes some dust settles on. So the letter is not posted. The letter actually is, all you have to do is blow the dust off. All of a sudden it begins to shine again as a full letter. What happens to it? Some dust settles on it. And therefore it covers up the real truth. When you blow up the dust, then you see, then the neshama begins to shine again. This is true. Every Yid belongs to the Jewish people. Nobody is a stranger. This is the real meaning, the real consciousness of it. This is something we shall never give up. So when we learn and daven, it is not learning and davening and thereby we're joining the Jewish people. That we're doing what a Yid is supposed to do, like everybody else. The Rebbe should help each one of us to consciously recognize this truth and to learn and daven with great joy, not that Chashom as a burden, with any kind of a duress, but roitzani, like the Rabbi says. Of course I want. After the whipping. After Rabbi Leactures screamed, but I really want. Thank Rabbi Leactures for screaming at me, because that's what I really want. And maybe it should help him that the neshama will dust itself out of all the dust that's settled on it and come out shining like a beautiful letterness of a paper.